The travel, I was not ready for it.
I did have reason to believe that we were all going to have our own row.
First day we got there, we were supposed to teach an English lesson. Emma's told that we had to scrap the entire English lesson because it was illegal to teach it at the time we were doing it.
After serving and being so selfless, you're like, you know what? I don't know if I want that old habit. I don't know if I want that old way of doing things.
Sometimes we think the hardest part is going. It actually can be coming home. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Courageous Conversations podcast. I am your host, Jason Ellis, and we are excited to be here once again. And it's not just me. I'm joined by 6 of my friends right here. I got 2 of my colleagues and friends, not in that order, but the other way around. And then 4 of, I guess, our former students and now fellow alumni and also friends, not in that order. And we are here today to talk about our, 11 days? Does that sound right? 11-day journey to Ethiopia earlier this summer. That was, I think, for at least the people in this semicircle, it was life-changing. And so that is why we're here today to discuss that. And so as we go through this, I'll let them introduce themselves as they begin to share. But obviously, I don't want to be the only one talking. So I would love to hear from some of you because this was the first year we did this trip. So y'all were truly the guinea pigs, with the exception of me and John Bernhardt, who's sitting to my left, going last year on a, 4-day?
4-day reconnaissance trip.
Yeah, we were in country for 4 days. And so we ended up traveling almost as long as it took us to get to spend in the country. But I would love to hear from at least 1 or 2 of you about your initial impressions, because every one of the people in the semicircle and on the trip went to Ecuador on a previous mission trip. Everybody, I think, went the previous year, except you. You went a couple years ago, John. But I would love for you to just share how you got introduced to the trip and why you decided to say yes. So, who wants to go first? Let's go, Tinsley. So, hey, who are you before you tell us a little bit about why you said yes?
I'm Tinsley Evans. I'm going to be at Arkansas in the fall. And I first heard about the Ethiopia mission trip just from Coach Jay and knowing that we had to go to Ecuador first. And I loved Ecuador so much. So I was really just wrestling and praying about which one I needed to go on, what the Lord was calling me to do. I had decided to go to Ecuador again. And I told Coach Jay, if a spot opens up, I'll go to Ethiopia. And I just really thought the Lord was calling me back to Ecuador. And then one day before 6th period, Coach Jay came up to me and said, there's a spot for the Ethiopia trip and it's yours if you want it. And I was like, this is just the Lord telling me that this is where I needed to be. So that's what I did. And I went to Ethiopia and I loved it.
And so you went, correct me if I'm wrong, there weren't a ton of expectations. You were just like, I'm signing up for this trip to go to the other side of the planet.
I was really scared, but it was worth it.
Good. And we'll get to that in a minute because I want you to share definitely with the audience that it was worth it. Because I think we all felt, I mean, there were people who were remarking at the end of the trip I'd go back right now. Now, I personally was I'd like to go home and take a week of rest and then go back. But I think we all felt that way, that it was something truly special. Okay. So as y'all signed up for the trip, then we started getting into planning. But keeping in mind, y'all are the guinea pigs, and there wasn't a long line of people who had gone on this trip before. And so what were your impressions as the time got closer? Just as you're thinking through hey, we're going to have to do this thing. We're going to get on this airplane. We're going to go over there. We've got a lot of different groups of people that we're working with. We have a schedule, but we don't know what any of it looks like. So what were your impressions as the time got a little bit, Hunt, you're smiling at me. I feel like Hunt,
Tiff would be a good
Solomon, one. And Tiffany Kelly would be great to share this one. So as we got closer, so it's January, February, March, you're having a look at shots. We got to make sure everybody still has a valid passport. All the logistical things of taking this trip and then actually planning it. So what were your impressions?
Me and Miss Kelly were definitely the ones that were worried that we had nothing planned. Because up until probably the first week of May, we still had nothing planned and we left in less than a month. But I remember sitting in Miss Wagner's room. We'd sit there and pretend to get stuff done. Just nothing got done. Had multiple meetings there.
But we had a great time.
We did. We had a wonderful time.
I like the fact wonderful time. It was team bonding. We got
laid some
done.
foundational concepts.
Yeah, we applied for our visas.
We did.
You got to apply for a visa to get into the country.
It took a couple tries, but we finally get them done. But the planning was fine. Some stuff. I guess the majority of the trip we had to work on the fly because, the first day we got there, we were supposed to teach an English lesson and was told that we had to scrap the entire English lesson because it was illegal to teach it at the time we were doing. Because in Ethiopia, you cannot teach the Bible to government school kids until after 4 o'clock, which we did not know until, and we were supposed to teach it at 2 o'clock. But got a good amount of plan done. We mostly just, I would say, bought the stuff we needed and kind of got it there and then kind of figured it out as we got there.
Yes, and to kind of elaborate on that before I kick it over to my friend Tiffany Kelly, to elaborate on that, there was just tons of unknowns. Like, and even when we got there were like things that they were like, hey, we know we wrote this down, but you're gonna be doing this instead of that. Like 5 minutes before, which I thrive in. I think that's fun. Miss Tiff, do you think that's fun?
No, it's not fun at all. But I waffled in between like a sheer panic attack and knowing that it was going to be okay because we were the guinea pig trip. But also I had been with these kids and I knew that all they needed was for somebody to say, we need to change. And they'd say, give us a minute. And they could totally pull it around. So they did. I was not concerned about what was going to happen once we got there because I knew that they could just work on the fly and make it all work, even when we were told, oh, you can't do that whole lesson that we had planned and everything else. They did an amazing job, and I didn't expect any less, and I knew that whatever we came in with was what the Lord had for that day. Yeah. So, which is a reminder to me every day.
Yes. Oh, by the way, who are you? We need to get to your introduction, and I'm
Tiffany
so sorry.
Kelly. I work in the athletics in the high school.
And you also have a unique perspective of not only being a chaperone on this trip, but also having a child that went with you on this trip as well, right?
Yes. And I would say, I know we're way early in the podcast, but I would say if you're a parent and you're listening to this, or your kid is saying, I think I would like to go to Ethiopia, and they're praying about it and you're praying about it, like, it is an amazing trip. Jason does a great job leading the group and being able to work on the fly like nobody else can. So just trust in that and trust in if the Lord is telling them to go. It is scary to be on the other side of the world, like so far away from your family and everything else. But it is an amazing trip, and the Lord will take care of all the details, even if you're puny on the other side of the world or our luggage, looks like it's going to fly off the van, all kinds of things. It's really, if your kid is on the fence, then just pray hard.
That rope was sturdy that was holding the luggage on the van.
We didn't lose the luggage.
Well, and Hunt, I want you to introduce yourself in just a second, but I'll elaborate on what you're saying there as well. There is something truly special. I mean, we've got amazing mission partners, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And they did such a great job, like welcoming us, and they did such a great job making sure that we were taken care of. And so a lot of the pivoting that we had to do it just involved the actual, for instance, we got there and we planned a certain itinerary. What was it? 10 days before, we found out that the Ethiopian government was declaring a national holiday for the Friday that we were going to be there, which meant they couldn't do school, which meant every single one of our plans around those days had to get switched around.
Correct.
Right? So there's just, in a context like that, there is an unpredictability when it comes to scheduling, which means we do have to be flexible. But it's also nice to have plans, right? Okay, so hey, Hunt, who are you?
I'm Hunt Solomon, and I will be attending Middle Tennessee MTSU in Murfreesboro this fall.
Hey, and speaking of attending college, I'll ask you one more question, and I'm going to kick it to everybody else in just a second. Are you glad you did this trip right before you went to college?
Yes, definitely, because it definitely gives you more perspective. Ecuador definitely did the same thing, but I feel like we kind of lose a little bit of what it felt like because then we just went right back to where I've been the past 3 years in Briarcrest. So it definitely gave me a better perspective on what to be thankful for and not to be too quick to be annoyed by or judge people based on, considering I've been to a country where everything that happens here is basically completely the opposite over there.
It's very much, I love that you said that, our time in Ethiopia very much enlightened us to everything in their culture is upside down from our culture. And that's neither good nor bad. That's not a like, oh, our culture's better or their culture's better. It's just way different. Whereas when we went to Ecuador, there was still a little bit of familiarity because A, we're in the same time zone and not 8 hours ahead after a 14-hour flight, which we'll get to in a minute. But also B, they speak Spanish and I don't speak Spanish. I almost flunked out of Spanish here at Briarcrest when I was a student. So there's that. So I don't speak, but it at least, I know, shocking. It at least sounds familiar, right? Like, and they use American currency. In Ethiopia, they use a totally different currency. It's a totally different, everything is different, with the exception of the fact we saw the gospel going forward, which I think was hugely impactful to see the same exact gospel that we hear proclaimed on this stage, because we are on the stage in Sparks right now. Same exact gospel proclaimed in a totally different context. It was really cool. Okay, so we're doing the pre-trip planning. We're getting things. We have to buy a bunch of bins.
Lots of bins.
Yes, Miss Tiff, real quick, hang on, because I want you to elaborate on that. We went to Sam's Club. You put a bunch of bins in your convertible and sent us a really funny picture of you driving down the street with the bins in the back.
Yes.
So that's kind of one of those things that I think goes underappreciated as far as what mission trips entail. But I did not tell my wife this was going to happen, but we received tons of boxes at our house that then had to get packed and taken over there, because you can't just order things on Amazon and have them delivered, to Addis Ababa. Exactly. Yeah. So we became couriers, and we became kind of just, the vehicle through which a lot of these things would get there that they needed. What was that like, packing those bins?
Well, that was a hot mess, but we got everything there, and kudos to the kids, because we had 15 people and 15 bins that all weighed 48.5 pounds each, and we had to drag them to the hotel, sleep with them. They were all in my room because it was crazy. And then get them all the way to Ethiopia. And then we thought, we're done. But we weren't, because then we had to bring back some of the bins for some of the mission partners that were coming back. So the kids did an amazing job dragging those bins all over Tarnation.
Oh, yeah, because it was 15 bins for 15 of us. So each one of us had our own bins.
Plus our luggage.
And so that made traveling, unique. We had to plan for bins. Yes. And that became a thing where there was a lot of different facets that had to go into that.
That's true. But the kids did great.
And you did a great job packing those. So, okay, now here becomes the next question. So we get to the airport, and then we actually have to do the physical travel. So maybe someone who hasn't shared, maybe you're smiling over there. So we have to do the physical travel, right? So we're sitting here and we're trying to figure out, okay, we got this flight, we got this other flight. I to be honest, I feel like that was the question I got asked the most about this trip from people who didn't go, was tell me about the flight, tell me about the travel, because it wasn't a jaunt over to Atlanta and then a flight straight down to Quito, which is 5 hours. It was a flight up to Chicago, and by the way, who are you? Just so you can, the audience can know who you are.
I'm Mamie Waters, and I'm headed to Sanford in the fall.
Awesome. And so what was the travel like?
The travel, I was not ready for it, honestly. I was like, we stepped on the plane, and actually, funny story, Coach Jay told us we were all going to have our own rows, like whole 3 seats, so we could like lay down and spend our 14-hour flights. And so we get on the flight, and we noticed there was an unusual amount of people to all have our own row. And then I realized we have our seats, and I was sitting actually by Hunt and Miss Tiff, actually, just like this.
Just like this.
Yes. For a long time.
And I, honestly, like 2 hours in that flight, I was like, why am I going here? Like, there's no way that I am really gonna spend 12 more hours on this flight. Like, there's no way I'm gonna make it there. And so it was very like tough on my body, especially like just the long, like 14-hour flight was rough.
And we land. And when we land, it's 8 a.m. in Addis Ababa, but it feels like midnight here.
Right.
Because you jumped 8 time zones in the process. So when we landed, were you slightly disorientated?
Yes, very. And then we had to go through the whole day and serve, which was...
Yes.
So we hit the ground running.
Yeah. So, all right, John, I want you to elaborate a little bit on that, because we had done the trip before. And we planned it that way. Like, now, also, to be fair, let me say this. When John and I did the trip last year, the plane was empty. We both had our own rows on the way back. And when I got on the website, about 72 hours beforehand. There was nobody on that plane, so I don't know where everybody came from. But
I'm a witness. He showed me.
Yeah,
They were
I did have reason to believe that everything, we were all gonna have our own row. And I do remember it was funny because y'all got on the plane before I did, and the group chat started
not
blowing.
me.
Oh yeah, I was with you. Yeah. But the group chat started blowing up. I think it was Caden. He was like,
It was Tinsley in the middle of two older men.
I was
And it was like,
sandwiched in between two random strangers.
Well, that was also my fault because I moved
was
everyone
freaking
around
out.
to have their own row. Because and so I just figured, and
I didn't have
everything worked out fine, but the plane was a lot more full. So, John,
packed.
It was
completely full.
packed. Yeah, I think they said there were 3 empty seats on the whole plane.
But you got to sit by one of them.
One of them was next to me.
Yeah. So but I just texted back into the group chat, hey, time to make new friends. It was great. So, but anyway, John, what's the design? You've done a lot of international travel. What's the design behind landing at midnight, what feels like midnight, but 8 a.m. and just pushing through a whole day?
The idea is to help get your body back on track quicker to your new time zone. So if you land, hopefully you sleep a little bit on the plane, you land, hit the ground running, you kind of reacclimate to the new time zone, get to bed at probably not a normal hour, maybe a little bit earlier than normal, but at least, where you're playing a little catch up on your sleep, but you can wake up the next day right and ready to go. Most of the people in Ethiopia, I think, told us that it takes about a day per hour of time zone. And so 8 time zones, presumably 8 days for our bodies to fully adjust. Well, we're only there for 10 or 11. You only got a whole 8 days to adjust. So we were trying to accelerate that. And it was hard that first day.
That first day was hard. And I hope what the audience is hearing, I hope they're hearing us talk about the fact that there were obstacles to overcome. It was not easy. It was not a, hour-long flight to Disney World or something like that. But what we're going to talk about in the back end, and I think we're going to start to turn the corner, is it's worth it. I think every one of us would say, we'd do it again. It was worth it. It was awesome. I was worried about one or two of y'all even getting on the plane to come home because I think y'all loved it so much. I'm glad y'all did because we promised your parents would bring y'all back. But that's the idea is you go through difficulty and you think because something's difficult, it's not worth it. I think that's something that we're all discipled in our culture is to think, oh man, if we want relaxation and we want ease, and there's nothing wrong with taking a vacation and being relaxed, but oftentimes when you're serving the Lord and it's really hard, that's the stuff that's worth it. That's the stuff where you see him show up the most. All right, so Sophie, I'll kick it to you. We get there the first day, and we're loading bags up. You ended up on a van, on top of a van, not while the van was in motion. Let me make sure I'm very clear about that. But you were helping load stuff on top of a van because we had so many bags. And I do also promise that I texted Faisal, who was our guide, and I said, we're coming with a lot of luggage. He goes, I got you. And I think he was still surprised. But we were able to make that work. So that whole first day into the second day, into the third, as we're starting to get acclimated, initial impressions, and then how did you see the Lord meet you in that? Just we show up, we're all disorientated because we're basically working through the night, but it's bright, it's sunny, and we're in the middle of the other side of the planet. Just those first couple of days. And by the way, who are you? And tell us where you'll be at school in the fall.
I'm Sophie Pierce, and I'm going to Pellissippi Community College in Knoxville in the fall.
Okay, and tell us about your first couple of days in country.
Well, like Coach Bernhardt said, we were only actually in country for 8 days, but we traveled across the world, I guess, for 11. So we were gone that whole almost 2 weeks. And I feel just when we got down there, it was honestly a fever dream. I was just telling them I don't even remember shoving those suitcases on top of the van because it was just we had already been awake 24 hours and we had another 24 hours to go. And so by that night, we had been awake almost 48 hours. It was crazy. We were all so tired, so ready to go to bed. Coach Jay calls a team meeting, and we're all
it
get
wasn't
us in
long.
bed.
It was the shortest team time we've ever done. It was 11 and a half minutes.
But we get to our rooms, and I roomed with Mamie, actually, and we get to our rooms, and we're all just so ready for bed, getting ready for bed. And I get in bed, and I've never, ever felt homesick or anything like that. But we get in bed, and I'm why am I here? What am I doing on this trip? This is horrible. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. And, I've never felt that. I was so excited to be on the mission field that week and so excited to be with all the people. It was basically, our friend group and our favorite teachers on the trip. So, we were so excited.
Oh, stop it.
But, but anyways, just like it became like 1 a.m., then like 2 a.m., then like 3 a.m. And by like 5 a.m., I was still up texting my parents. And, at home it's like 3 in the afternoon, so they're awake and fine. But I was texting them, just like them sending scripture over to me and just like ministering to me. And I almost went and woke up these wonderful teachers in the middle of the night to tell them that I couldn't sleep. But instead, I just pretty much stayed up through the night and prayed and just got through that night. But looking back on that night, it was just crazy how the Lord used that in the rest of my week. And like, I got no sleep. I was exhausted the next day. It almost felt like I'd been up 3 days after that because I slept maybe 1 hour. But just looking back on that, looking back on the scripture that was sent to me and just like the people that prayed over me and stuff. And then I told my team about it on the end of the trip. And it was just like, it's just crazy how the Lord used it. And then Miss Tiff touched on this just a little bit, but just like, walking into so many unknowns just leaves so much more room for the Lord to work. And like, we had no idea what we were going into. Honestly, we had no planning. Like, they're joking about it, but we really didn't. Like, we got there and had like
a lot more planning.
We had some planning.
But we got there and we're very confused on like what each next step was. And then just walking into that little team room and they're telling us that, oh, all your plans, like, forget those. We're going to give y'all some new plans. And it was just like on the fly, make new plans, whatever. But it just gave so much way for the Lord to work and just showed his faithfulness and just his promise still standing even in Ethiopia.
So one of the things that I think we talked about in light of your story was the spiritual warfare that goes into these trips. And I've noticed this on any of these short-term trips is there's this kind of like initial excitement about signing up, and then there becomes all this hesitation and all these doubts and all these uncertainties. And then I think as Christians, we have three enemies. We have the world, the flesh. So the world systems are broken and they want to lure us in. Our flesh loves sin and wants to run towards that. And the devil. So there is an element where the spiritual growth that comes from these trips and the way that we get to just see God move, I think the enemy hates that. And so the enemy will use whatever he can at his disposal to try to derail that, especially early on in the trip, especially those first guys. And I started doing this in any of the pre-trip meetings, like when I have a couple days before, I'm like, you might be literally sitting here second guessing the fact you signed up for this trip. Push through that because I think the Lord wants to do something special. Okay, so with all that groundwork being laid, what did we actually do when we got there? Like so we primarily, to jog your memory, and this is for anybody, 3 ministries that we worked with. We worked with Bingham Academy. We worked with the government school next door to Bingham Academy and Bingham's outreach program to them. And then finally, we also worked with Cora Kids. And so once we got there, and we had more plans than y'all are acting like we did, but once we got there and we started implementing the new plans that we had to kind of come up with on the fly, who are we working with? What did that look like? What does ministry in Ethiopia look like? And how did you see the Lord bless? Because you sign up for these trips, and I think rightfully so, we think we're going to serve. And we do. We go to serve. Like, we want to be of use to the Lord. But honestly, like I feel like I come home being more blessed than I could have ever blessed other people. And that's because of the people that are faithfully there serving. So anyway, all that being said, that runway, what do y'all got?
So when we first got there, we worked with Bingham, which is the international school. That's kind of where a lot of missionary kids are, and also just other people around that area, but it's a Christian school. And that's kind of who we were like partnering with at the beginning. And we kind of just like did VBSs with them. I remember we did a chapel with them. We led that. Tinsley and Caden did that, and Miss Tiff.
And Miss Tiff, they led worship.
Harmon had to play.
Yeah,
Harmon,
had to play guitar.
But so we did
Lots of
that.
help.
And then they also partner with the government school, as Coach Jay just said. And so we partnered with them. And the first day, actually, when we were kind of still disoriented and still feeling great, we actually went through the government school. And so we worked with them, and they often came over to Bingham, and we talked about Jesus to them because, like Hunt said earlier, we're not allowed to talk about Jesus until after 4. So they would come over, and we would teach them about the Lord, and it was called an English class, but it was really just us teaching them about like what Jesus has done in our lives, basically.
Yeah, and the whole idea is we're using English while we do that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of y'all got to share your testimonies with them. And this group was definitely mixed as far as religious affiliation. Like we had some that were wearing the Muslim hijab. We had some that come from an evangelical Christian background. We have some that come from a Ethiopian Orthodox background. And so it was kind of all over the spectrum, but y'all got to share your faith and build relationships with them. Because y'all played soccer. What were some of the other things y'all did?
Foursquare. Did we play Foursquare?
Yeah, we played a bunch of games.
Yeah.
Hacky sack.
Hung out like
Bubbles.
friends.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So, Sophie, I want you to also elaborate a little bit. So we were working with Bingham, and we were working with the government school next door, and then we were also working with a ministry called Cora Kids.
Yes.
All right, so Cora Kids, I'll give you a little bit of runway, and then I want you to take it and run with it. Cora Kids was a ministry that Faisal, who was our guide, who's, by the way, awesome. Faisal is the man. I want to be like Faisal when I grow up. But Faisal, if you're watching this, I love you, man. We went there, and this was a ministry that Faisal actually connected us with, and it's been in existence for a number of years. But the ministry primarily works with street kids that live near basically the town dump in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and they help prepare them to enter into government school in like 3rd or 4th grade level. And I think some of the kids were older than John. Is that right? Some of the kids were
some
older,
up to middle school age.
Yes. But all of it is infused with the gospel. And so you were talking earlier about the lesson that the kids got on kind of their Saturday morning Bible club, and how that actually spoke to you spiritually. So I'd love for you to elaborate on that. And I'd love for you to also just elaborate on kind of what you noticed and how those kids, the ones we went to serve, actually were a blessing to you.
When you walk in, like, you're surrounded by like trash, this horrible smell. Like, all of us were getting like headaches. Miss Tiff like rubbing mint all over our, like, peppermint on our noses, all this stuff. But like, we were just like miserable in the setting. And then like we sat down with the kids, and like, mind you, like, when we walked in, it smelled like trash. There's birds circling their school. Like, it's literally just like you would think that something died there. Like, it smells so bad. And right behind you is a big pile of trash that looks like a mountain, and it really was just trash, and like people walking all over it, and that's their home. And so like we went there, and we get there and we walk in this door, and there's no kids, and we were just like, huh? And the lady like tells them all to come downstairs, and they come like rushing down the stairs, like smiles all over their faces. And we were just like, oh my goodness, like, they live in this trash, it smells so bad, why are they smiling so big? Like, it was just crazy, like, to put it into perspective. Anyway, so like Coach Jay said, they're doing this Bible, like, Saturday morning, like, I don't know. It's every Saturday. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, every Saturday they will bring the kids in the neighborhood over and basically just do like a VBS style morning for about, I guess it was about 2 hours we were there. Yeah.
So anyways, we only went to the Core Kids program twice, but one of them was on a Saturday. So it was like kids that didn't go to school there all throughout the week, because like the 2 kids that I stuck with most of the time, they weren't there the second time we went. So they just came for the Bible club. And anyways, we got there, and they were doing a lesson in like a VBS type style on Jesus calming the water in the storm and Jesus walking on water and everything. And so they had this little demonstration with like a blue tarp and shaking it and like doing the storm and everything. And the kids were just so full of joy, like so excited to be there, so excited to be a part of like telling us about Jesus. And like they were ministering to us, but we were supposed to be there ministering to them. And like that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned there, just because like right when we sat down, we're talking about our storms. And I'm thinking like when I'm home, I'm like, do I get Chick-fil-A today? Do I get Mojo like this morning, whatever? And they're like, do I get food this week? Or like, do I have a set of clothing that I haven't worn this year? Like, that, do I get something new? Like, you know, like that's just their struggle. And like, they don't have homes to go to. They don't have, not all of them have wonderful families that like love them and like that are there supporting them and whatnot. So it just like showed you your immense blessings. And then the second takeaway I had was when we brought them out like this tiny loaf of bread, probably like, I don't know, however big it was, but it was just a tiny loaf of bread and a little cup of tea, like not even a cup, I don't know. But it was just such a small amount of food and tea. And we brought it out to them. A few people just brought out these trays. They each grabbed one. They waited until every single person got one. And then the first thing they did was offer it to us. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I started tearing up, and the little girl was looking at me like, is this girl okay? And I just literally started tearing up thinking about, like, they have nothing. They have the love of Jesus And that's it. Like, they have no food, no clothes. Like, a normal day in their life is going to hear about Jesus and then going right back to the trash. And so, like, all they had was Jesus. That was the only thing they had. But they had joy, and they had peace, and they had hope, and they were living like millionaires. Like, they had it all. And like, in Jesus, what we were learning about was when you have storms, you do have it all. Like, if you have Jesus alone, you have it all. And that was so encouraging to me. And just seeing them, their selflessness and their kindness to just hand me a loaf of bread, I just started crying, and I was like, no, you eat that, like, that's for you. And then you start seeing like the kids around just start like grabbing a few more and getting more excited, and we like started singing like Jesus Loves Me, and just like talking about like songs we knew they sang for us, and it was just a crazy experience. That was really impactful for me.
On that Saturday, Tinsley was a little under the weather, so we stayed back, and I've never seen 11 young adults be so terrified to get in that van, because they were. I sent the peppermint oil and some peppermints and some gum with them, because we could smell the dump, sometimes even in our compound, which was a very nice compound, very safe compound. For all the parents listening, it was a very safe compound. But we put him on the bus. Tinsley was up in her room, and I thought, oh, dear Lord, I'm not sure they're going to make it. I mean, like, I've never seen them so terrified. So, we stayed back, and y'all came back a couple of hours later, and like, coming off of the bus was slightly different. I mean, they couldn't wait to tell us, what had happened, how it was, how they were so excited to go back in a couple of days where we could run the little VBS program or whatever with some of the other kids. So to visibly see the Lord work through our kids, and not even be on campus with them, or at the dump or whatever, was amazing. Such a transformation.
Yeah. And Tinsley, I'll kick it to you and ask you a question real quick. In light of that, because you didn't get to go the first time because you were a little under the weather. One of the things that we told people, John, was that everybody's going to have a day where they don't feel great, and some people have days where they feel worse than others. But when you're traveling internationally like that, and I'm learning this, when you travel internationally like that and your stomach's not used to food like that, you're just not gonna feel great, and that's okay. But yet, Tinsley, you reminded me of this because we went the second time, and you were like, "Well, this is actually my first time." I was like, oh yeah, you weren't with us the first time, right? Like, so you were seeing it all through that lens. And as someone who did have a day where you felt pretty under the weather and you were behind, and you getting to see that along with the other things that we got to do, including leading worship with Mistiff and Caden and Harmon. What would you say? Why would you say it's worth it? Why would you say it's worth it to endure, push through the difficulties? Maybe seeing what you saw at Core Kids or at Bingham or with the after-school program. What was it about just the trip itself, seeing the Lord meet you in that, seeing His gospel, all of those things that you would say is worth it, even though there was some difficulty involved?
Yes, there's definitely difficulty. I definitely didn't feel good, but it really did only take a day, and then I was back, and I was actually so nervous to go to the Core Kids because I was like, they've already kind of built relationships with everyone else. Like, I feel like I'm just going to be like standing there in the corner. And I walked in, and all of the kids walked out of their like little building, and every single one of them came up to every single one of us and gave us a hug. And I love hugs, so this was like, I loved this so much. This was so amazing. And it just reminded me that like, I didn't need to be nervous about it. Like, if I would just come in, and anyone who's thinking about going into the trip, there's going to be a lot of challenges, but you come in, you love on these kids, and you just hang out with them, and that might make their whole year. Like, that's something that they don't get all the time. They don't have parents that just love on them. Like, I've been so blessed with amazing parents that just do everything for me, and they don't have those same blessings. So just going in prepared to love on the kids, and I didn't know what to expect going in, but then leaving, I just felt so much closer with everyone in the trip, so much closer with the Lord. Being sick in my room, I prayed a lot. And as someone who really...
That'll happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
As someone who, like, I would pray at night before I went to bed, but going into this trip, I started praying like more throughout my day, just for strength and for comfort, and just seeing how much prayer really does work, and just getting that comfort almost as soon as I said the prayer, like using that now, coming back here, preparing to go to college and just struggling through different things. Like, Lord, give me peace, give me comfort. And He will meet you in that, and He will do it faithfully.
Well, and you saw God meet you there. right? Like you saw he's faithful and he's going to use you and he's going to use the core kids that you came to serve to bless you just as much. And so you're sitting here and you're thinking, hey, a year from now, they will hopefully remember that we came and served them. But a year from now, you're also going to remember how they blessed you in return. All right, so let me kick it to our adults real quick, and then we'll let a couple of people have the last word. John, we'll start with you. Seeing the ministry of Bingham and what Bingham was doing. We mentioned Faisal, who was our guide. Amanda, she was the one who was headed up the community outreach. And you having lived on the mission field, especially in education, what are some things that you found interesting just about what was happening behind the scenes? Because really, we don't show up and do what we do unless there's a lot of faithful people who are doing what they do day in and day out, so that we can show up and hopefully just be a little bit of wind in their sails for a week, right? That's the goal. It's how can we bless the missionaries? How can we come alongside what they're already doing? And I told them this. I said, please don't let me screw this up. Please don't let me be the one that ruins 10 years of ministry because I showed up in my cultural ignorance and didn't know what to do. There's funny stories we don't have time for with that. But what were just some of the things you noticed with the mission partners? Yeah, you remember. Let's still remember. So we're not going there. But they told me it was fun. But what are just some things you saw with our mission partners that you thought were just such a blessing to you, knowing what was happening behind the scenes?
Well, I think you can see the long-standing impact of Bingham. Has been around since the 40s there, and so it has been an established component of that community for a long time that has been ever-changing, predominantly Muslim community now, with a Christian school right in the middle of it, which you think would cause a lot of adversity amongst the community, but in fact it brings them together. So I think just seeing how intentional people like Faisal and Amanda are under Kent's leadership about how they were really trying and working towards making an intentional relationship with the school next door, with members of their community, doing home visits. They really are getting out there and getting into the community. And then you think about just being a teacher. The last couple of weeks of school as a teacher, the word done doesn't even begin, right, to really embody what you feel. And so even just to be there and give them a day to pack up their classrooms and sign out and check out and have their own team time, because a lot of those teachers, they're leaving Ethiopia and won't be coming back for years, if ever, and so making sure that those even just community members, those teachers, have that ability to kind of build their goodbye raft back home and whatnot, and for us to kind of work with their kids. And shout out to Kate Ambles for learning how to make balloon animals that day. Yes. Talk about, again, pivoting and working on it. Really, these kids, our kids, I think were such just a light to the people we were serving as well. But you could see that it was really the people at Bingham who had been there for a long time, people at Core Kids, who just are pouring their lives out every single day. And the strength required to do that it was phenomenal to see, but it was also great to help lift or alleviate that burden just for a little bit.
Yeah.
Just for a week. We could help come alongside that, which is just phenomenal.
I love the idea of, and Ms. Stiff, I'm coming to you in just a second. I love the idea of just being the wind in the sails of the people who are serving. And I think that seeing that ministry and seeing the gospel go forward, that's what it is. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news that Christ has died for the sins, not just of us here in Eads, Tennessee, but of the students in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and seeing students respond to that and the life change that comes from that and the joy. Because one of the things I need to hit on this, joy does not depend on your circumstances. And that's exactly what we all saw when we were with the students that y'all described, I think, that they don't have a lot of material things that can bring them happiness, but they have so much joy in Christ. All right, so Ms. Tiff, anything you saw just from the behind the scenes, just looking at the ministries, looking at how these missionaries are pouring themselves out, getting to live on a compound with them?
Yes, they did an amazing job, like John said, and they have been doing an amazing job, over the years with the people coming in and out, with Bingham and the Core Kids and the government school. But they also did a great job with our kids, because we would pivot multiple times a day, but they would help our kids be able to say, okay, this works well, or let's try this, or this game, they love this game, because we are going in completely blind in some ways. We don't know these kids. We don't know their backgrounds. They're obviously coming from different cultures and everything else, but for them to be able to come alongside our kids to where our kids felt comfortable enough to try some things, and see what works and what doesn't. They were great leaders in that way for our kids.
Yeah, they really did set us up for success, and
They
I'm
did.
thankful for that. All right, here's the last question, because we got to land this plane at some point. Even though I could sit here, we could just talk for 3 hours, but I don't think the people working behind the scenes would enjoy that. All right, so here becomes, or maybe y'all wouldn't either. All right, but here becomes the last question. How did you? And you can kind of frame this up. We'll go one or two of y'all. How did you see the gospel at work in Ethiopia? Seeing lives changed. Y'all got to proclaim the gospel, like seeing the good news of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection for our sins and for our justifications. Romans 4:25. How did you see that, and how has that changed you since you've been home? So I don't think any of us came back and were really the same after we got back. And I mean that in a good way, not in like a scarred for life kind of way. But just how did you see the gospel at work in Ethiopia and then come home and you've been living different in light of that since?
For me, it was kind of like going over there. It was so weird to me because I'd been to Ecuador and I was kind of like, I saw Jesus there. But then when I went to Ethiopia, I was like, wow, like these people are really learning about Jesus and how my God's the same as it's over there. And like, obviously, like I know that and we like talk about it, but like going over there to actually see that and be able to like know that some of them know the Lord, but then also some don't. But it's awesome to see that it's still moving over there. And coming back here, I definitely didn't have a spiritual high as much as I did from my last mission trip in Ecuador, but I definitely like learned to like be thankful for what I had. And like, I think someone said this earlier, but like, I literally have thought about that trip ever since, and like thinking about like the like lessons we've learned and like the people and all the stories, and like looking at like how much I have. And like Coach Shay like said this on the trip so much, like not to be like negative about what we have or like take it for granted, but just like know that like some people just like don't have as much as we do, but not to be like guilty for what we have. And that's something like I've had to like pray about here, but it's definitely like strengthened my relationship, especially going to college. Like it's like helped me like with my walk grow even stronger than it already was.
Well, and the idea is we don't need to feel guilty for our material blessings, but realize we've been blessed to be a blessing. So to whom can we be a blessing once we've gotten home, once we see how, because I mean, the world we live in is very concentrated with the types of blessings. And just everybody has the same stuff, so you don't get the bigger perspective of that you get when you go to the other side of the planet and you see that. But then the question is, God's blessed us with with nothing else in a Christian education. I mean, we get to hear about the gospel day in and day out. Y'all got to come into this place and hear about Jesus every Monday morning wearing chapel clothes, right?
Right.
But it's easy, and I did it too. It's easy to take that for granted. But then when you realize how blessed you are to have theological training, and it's like, all right, God, you blessed me with this. How do I bless others? All right, anybody else got anything they would add just about being changed after seeing the gospel at work, coming home, and living in light of that?
I feel like Mamie was kind of touching on this. Just like it being night and day different from Ecuador, but also like equally as impactful. Like if you're thinking about going on either trip, both equally as impactful. Amazing trips, wonderful the way like Briarcrest does it, and just the comfortability you have in going with your peers and whatnot, and then bringing that back. Like Hunt was kind of saying earlier, like we're all going into college, and that's going to change us every single day in college, or like anyone in high school. It's going to change you even walking around the halls of Briarcrest or anywhere. But there's so many like aspects. Like we did so much in the trip in such a short time, like even having dinner with the missionaries. Like we didn't even get to touch on that, but that was just like such a small factor of like seeing people's daily lives, like the Bridges or the Winsteads, or just like even Amanda and Faisal and Cece, and like just seeing the way they're living their lives, and that just like altering your perspective. Like even coming home, just like whether it's like little random tasks, like hanging out with your friends, or like working, babysitting, helping your parents out, like each part of our day has been like altered just by perspective. Like, how can I better honor the Lord while doing this? Or like, look at my circumstances, think about theirs, and like change your perspective on it, and like change the way you would have responded to it. Because I feel like all of our response was like altered, and just like immense impact. Just like, it was crazy just to see how we all came back. And like even talking about the trip, like every time we talk about it, there's a new thing pointed out where I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like you can't even grasp it all in the time we had. So.
Oh, when you're there, it's like it's like drinking from a fire hose.
And we had that one day where we like sat in our rooms and just like 2 hours of just like journaling,
that
praying.
was your idea, John.
Reading in the Bible. And that was like one of my favorite things, honestly, because now I have my journal. I go back and look at it, and I'm like, I don't even remember that. And then you start praying over it, and you're like, look at this name. Like, I didn't even remember who that is. But then you go look at photos and the names, and you're like praying for these people that you might not even remember who they are, but like God's working in their life all the way across the world, which is just crazy to
the
see.
The literal other side of the planet. What you got, Hunt? Tell us.
One thing I want to say is I just didn't spend as much time as the girls I did with the guys because we were all in one cabin. But there was one night that we stayed up till like 2 in the morning just talking about the trip and what we've experienced. And like made me touched on earlier, and so did Sophie. Ecuador I would relate as a spiritual high, and Ethiopia I would say is more like a spiritual strengthening. Because like you just go there and it's such like a shock that like you can't really you can have a spiritual high there, but it's almost more difficult to because you were always running. The first 48 hours you don't even know what's happening. But like spending 8 days on the other side of the planet with this group will like if anyone like had to call me and like said they need something, I could be there in a minute, like immediately. Like it's just coming back, the relationships I built there. Like I don't have to talk to these people for 5 years. Like if they needed something or we was like, y'all want to go back? Like immediately I would go back. Like just having these relationships, it's so easy to build relationships when you're outside your comfort zone. Like we walked these halls for 4 years and I may not say hi to anybody. Or you'd walk past people every day and maybe say something to them once a day. But like when you're there and outside your comfort zone, it's so much easier to just build that relationship. And so for anyone that's like wanting to maybe thinking about going to either Ethiopia or Ecuador, just know that you may not know a single person on your trip, but by the end of the week, you'll be best friends with everybody.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and it's definitely focused, intense relationship time because we're together 24/7, not sleeping, the whole 9 yards. All right, Tinsley, you got one more thing you want to add?
I'll add.
Here she goes.
I had a really hard time coming home and adjusting to seeing the poverty but at the same time, the joy that those people in Ethiopia had, and then transitioning back here to Germantown, Tennessee, where everyone is so blessed, and just in America, being blessed to be born here. And it was really hard for me to come back and not feel super guilty about, the things that I had, but instead using those blessings to tell others about where I had been and, coming back and being intentional about telling others about God and about the trip that I had just taken. So when I came home from Ecuador, it was about the same thing, but it was really hard for me to talk about what I had done. I didn't want people to feel uncomfortable when I was telling them about God, and they wouldn't really understand what I had been through and all those things. But now when I come home, I tell all of these amazing stories, and people really do they ask questions, they're intrigued. Even if someone isn't a believer, they do want to hear about your experiences that you've had. And it was just so impactful coming home and being able to tell people about where I'd been.
It's interesting because you hit on something really important. Sometimes we think the hardest part is going. It actually can be coming home. And that's not an indictment on the people at home. It's just we've experienced something and we're trying to process it and figure out how to share what we saw and how we saw God's goodness. All right, John, you want the last word? You want to land this plane?
I do. I was reminded while Hunt was talking about just his experience and how selfless I feel like everyone was on this trip. And I feel like that was really a big theme in our group because while we were there, right, people weren't thinking about themselves. They were, offering water to, their peers. They were asking them how they were doing. They were investing in each other and in the community through the gospel. I mean, they weren't looking at their phones. They weren't worried about the scores of games. They weren't, worried about who posted what or, who unfollowed or followed who, or, it was just so you were just present with each other doing the Lord's work. And I think that's one of those things that makes the transition back hard. It's because now all of a sudden you're getting back into old routines, which may have some old habits that after serving and being so selfless, you're like, you know what? I don't know if I want that old habit. I don't know if I want that old way of doing things. And so kind of wrestling with that and kind of grappling with it when you get back, I think it's one of the hardest parts of a trip like this. I know getting there is hard. The first 48 hours, you don't remember anything. It's a just kind of a
dream.
daze,
I think
right?
the word was fever dream.
Yeah. But sometimes getting back is hard too, though, because you just jump right back into life, and then you struggle having to process all of these things. But I will say that this group was phenomenal. I taught some of them and not all of them, and I was just so proud at the work and willingness that they had. I mean, you think of the laborers being few, or here we had many, and they did such a great job. So I'm so proud of y'all.
And I'll say this just by way of the last word to go along with that. I think that's infused by the gospel. Over and over again, we were being reminded of Jesus and reminded of his love and his grace and his mercy. And the more you're reminded of that, the more you're freed to be selfless instead of selfish. And so, yeah, I think that when you're working on mission for Jesus and you're seeing him clearly, it empowers a lot of amazing things. Well, with that being said, I think we're wrapping up. Thank y'all for being here. This was a lot of fun. It sounds like Hunt just wants to run the trip back. Just go ahead and look right now. Let's go right now.
I would go with any of these kids. These kids, like, they might not be called to be full-time missionaries, but I would go with any of them anywhere. They can do it.
And Miss Tiff, do not go on a trip.
You need this. Yes.
I just do the laundry.
And organize structure. She needs to come do my house.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but we want to thank you, the audience, for joining us. And we appreciate every time that you tune in to the Courageous Conversations podcast. And that was a really weird outro. We will see you here again on the next episode.